Well, it's called the Security and Prosperity Initiative, which is meant in many ways to build on the edifice of the NAFTA, which is between all three countries, as you know, as a legal context and framework for the relationships between the three countries. The reason for the security itself and the security part of this has a lot to do with the fact that we're dealing in a post 9/11 world, a time where in relationship to the war on terrorism, all sorts of new imperatives came into place, the anti-terrorism legislation, Patriot Acts, and things like that. So what's happened is that there's now an attempt to try to advance this forward and to put this on a different keel, and what they want to do is to avoid any kind of new legislation or public debate around this. What they want to do is to be able to do it by administrative fiat or executive order, which is in effect to make as many changes as you can in knocking down the barriers and harmonizing the relationship between the three countries so that you start to operate more and more as a common market, and to turn North America into a common market. Now that's definitely on the economic front, and that's definitely dealing with the standards and the regulations between the three countries, to harmonize them, to bring them into line with one another. So it means harmonizing our health standards across all three countries. It means harmonizing our transportation, our licensing, our every conceivable measure you can think about. And there were 12 committees that were put in place to start that process and to get that going, made up of bureaucrats from all three countries to work together to try to bring about what they could do through executive order or administrative fiat, and not through having to push something to the legislative level. So this is the process that's been going on at the economic level to bring about that kind of harmonization. At the same time, which is not spoken about very much, is the extent to which there's also the tying of a security perimeter around all three countries, and to be able to make sure that there is a great deal of control over the movements of people within that bloc, and certainly anybody that's coming from overseas, landing in Canada and wanting to get in the United States, that definitely is brought under very tight scrutiny. So what is going on now as a result of all that is that the Patriot Act and the anti-terrorism legislation are really of Canada, that is, are now very much in force, as are the anti-terrorism laws of Mexico. And the idea is to create the security perimeter around all three countries. And it means that everything gets redefined, or a lot of things get redefined in the security framework. So, for example, take energy. At one point, we would say that under the North American Free Trade Agreement, we would say that there's a free flow of energy between Canada and the United States. But under this new arrangement, there will be what's called a Resource Security Pact. And that Resource Security Pact is meant to guarantee a flow of resources, energy resources, say from Canada to the United States, or from Mexico to the United States. And it's, in some ways, it's a bit ironic, because we already thought we had that in place, unfortunately, in terms of Canada, because we negotiated through the NAFTA the proportional sharing clause that in effect says that we must continue the flow of oil and gas and other resources from Canada to the United States, and maintain a level of exports that is consistent with what the average has been over the previous 3 years. So since there's always been an increasing amount of oil and gas exported to the United States, we must maintain that level of exports. And therefore, for environmental reasons, dealing with the greenhouse gas emissions, for example, if we were to put a quota on the amount that we're exported, that would be seen as a violation of NAFTA. Under the Resource Security Pact, that wouldn't even come into play. We would automatically be obligated, period, to continue that flow of energy, of oil and gas between Canada and the United States. So therefore, what's being put in place is just an extension of what's in the Homeland Security Act and Agency of the United States, is to make sure that there is a guaranteed supply of that resource flowing from Canada to the United States.
Does Canada have enough for itself?
Well, in the case of natural gas, as I was explaining before, we do export natural gas to the United States, but we've been using a heck of a lot of that natural gas that we do have in conventional supplies to actually fuel the tar sands. So as we run lower and lower, I think at this point we've got 8.7 years left. But that could, in a few years from now, we could be in the real danger zone. In fact, people would say that once you get below 10 years, you're in the danger zone. So it's very tight right now, and I think that we're heading for a serious problem in Canada if we continue to move in this direction. The whole process is, if you want to put it, by stealth, in the sense that there is no way in which this will be democratically debated in the legislatures of either of the three countries. It's not something that will be debated in Congress. It will not be debated in our Parliament or the political process in Mexico. And the reason is that both the corporate elite and the political elite, if you will, of our countries have decided that they don't want this to become a major issue of debate. They don't want the potential process towards greater unification and deepening of integration between the three countries to be a matter of serious public debate. What they want is to be able to make sure that the job gets done by using what we call administrative fiat or executive order. So the executive order of the president, a lot of power comes under that. A lot of power comes under the executive order or administrative fiat of our prime minister as well. So what they've done is resorted to those kinds of powers and said, get the job done that way. And that means no. It means bringing these changes in, if you will, by stealth. It means that the public has no say in the matter. There cannot be any real debate. It is done through the executive and administrative powers of the governments as they presently exist. And on top of that, it is beneath the radar screen. Nobody knows what's really going on. These 12 committees that have been working and back and forth and trying to look for ways of harmonizing, etc., there is no public report of this stuff. Very little of it is available to the public in any one of the three countries.
So is there going to be joint military forces, do you know?
Well, there is. That's a good question. There is already a great deal of what is called interoperability. What's happened is that there was a big push since 9/11 on Canada to increase its military spending and to become much more of a player in the process. Well, we've seen that happen. Our military spending has just grown by leaps and bounds in the last 5 or 6 years. We've made a commitment to Afghanistan to be a major player in the war in Afghanistan. Something we stayed out of the war in Iraq, but we didn't join the coalition of the willing. But by God, we're in there as far as Iraq is concerned, and
Afghanistan.
I'm sorry, as far as Afghanistan is concerned. And at the same time, the increase in military spending, which means, of course, buying new hardware and equipment and so forth. Much of the equipment that we are buying, will buy, and are buying in purchasing is equipment that makes our forces much more interoperable with that of the U.S. So that we're seeing behind the scenes a greater and greater integration of our armed forces, or assimilation of our armed forces into that of the United States, and we'll see more of that happen. Of course, when you're dealing with the kind of world we're in today, with the technologies and everything that are necessary, if you're going to be if you're going to really work side by side and in close communication with the armed forces of another country, having your technology and machinery as being interoperable is really important.
And that's a great boom and a boon for American
yes.
weapons makers.
Exactly.
And isn't this just really a step in the direction of annexing Canada and Mexico to the United States? I mean, it eventually will be so integrated or harmonized.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Could you say something about that and how you feel about it?
Well, it's been a process that's been going on for quite some time, certainly since the first free trade deal between Canada and the United States in 1989, and then the North American Free Trade Agreement, and now the Security and Prosperity Initiative. All of these have been steps along the way to greater and greater integration between Canada and the United States, and for that matter, all three countries. And so, yes, I mean, eventually we may see, of course everybody denies it, but we may very well see, just like we've seen the European Union, where all the states pool their sovereignty together into something called the European Union. We're very much like, we seem to be heading down that road ourselves in North America.
Didn't the people get to vote on that, though?
Oh yes, but that's exactly it. People got to vote on that.
And there was a lot of debate.
Yeah, and there was a lot of debate, and some countries stayed out of it and never joined the European Union, and the big debate in Norway, for example, and so forth. But no, it's not happening that way. At least to date, it's not happening that way in Canada, the United States, and Mexico.
Well, Canada has always been famous for your health care system being so much better than the United States, and in fact, we know some people are considering moving there just because of that. What do you foresee happening in those regards with this?
Well, again, we've also been fearing the fact that, or at least we've gone through a period where we've really had major public discussion and debate about our healthcare system. Our healthcare system has been in some trouble lately, and when it's in trouble, then the forces of privatization start to take over, and so there has been what we call creeping privatization inside of our healthcare system, and the more that happens, the more we end up, at least parts of our healthcare system become somewhat harmonized with that of the United States. So I think that this is a direction in which things have been going. Thank goodness that there's been a sufficient, or I shouldn't say sufficient, but there's been a great deal of resistance expressed on the part of Canadians about that happening to their healthcare system, that we've been able to at least force the government to some extent to pour more money into strengthening the healthcare system. But it is a concern, and it's an ongoing concern, and Canadians can never take for granted the fact that they have a universal healthcare system now, today, but 5 years from now, we don't know. And so this is all part of the process that's going on right now.
So
is it right to call, I've heard it referred to as the North American Union, you don't think of it in those terms, or you don't use those terms?
Well, it certainly that language has been used, and I think all I can say is that the other side has used that language, but also is very careful sometimes not to use it publicly, because they know that there's enough resistance in both Mexico and in Canada and to some extent even the United States to not go down that path. So I think that's why they're doing it by stealth. That's why they're doing it by administrative fiat. But certainly in some of the documents, reference is made to the North American Union. You're absolutely right.
So what is your strategy? How are you organizing to educate the public of all three countries and present a united grassroots front, if that is what you're doing?
Well, I think, Canadians have become somewhat complacent on this. This is not where we were in 1987 and 1988 when we were able to amass an enormous amount of public opinion in opposition to the first free trade agreement. What's happened is it's like the old story, of the frog if you put a frog in hot water, it'll jump out real quick. But if you put a frog in warm or lukewarm water and just heat it up gradually, it gets used to it. And the problem is that over the last 15 years or so, we have become increasingly, or actually 20 years, because it's been 20 years since the free trade debate really began in Canada, that over that period of time, especially over the last 15 years, there's been a fair amount of complacency that's set in. And so it's to get this thing on the political radar screen as far as citizens are concerned, as a part of public debate, discussion and debate. We're up against more challenges than we used to. Before, you were dealing with a treaty, a deal that was in front of you. It was going to go before the legislatures of all the countries. The political process was there to be able to follow it. It's not the case this time. This is why the danger, the real danger of a very anti-democratic process is underway to push this below the radar screen so that the bureaucrats are in charge of it, etc., and nobody really knows publicly what's going on, and there's very little public discussion and debate in either of the three countries. So the problem is how to stir this up again, how to really get it going again, and how to help people understand what's happening. So my feeling is that there's two ways of doing this, and both have to happen. One is that you take the issues apart piece by piece and you start to address them. So you look for the hot button issues that exist for all three countries, something like energy, for example, and build a campaign and a strategy around the energy debate. So one of the things that we're trying to do with the Athabasca tar sands issue, or the Alberta tar sands, is to make that a major issue and to get that out front and get people aware of what is happening and put it in the context of the Security and Prosperity Initiative. The same is happening around issues dealing with homeland security and the larger security perimeter that's taking place. Other parts of it are being dealt with around the jobs and the gutting of our manufacturing sector in Canada and what that really means for the future and things like this. So we're beginning to find and pick away the issues around which there can be some mobilization. Another set of issues and concern is obviously the military and armed forces and the relationship between them across the board. So that's happening. But the second thing is we have to eventually bring this together for people to see that this is all part of the common agenda. That even though you break it apart and break it down into manageable chunks for people, all of which is important for mobilizing people, it's also important for people to see the whole and the direction in which things are going in. There's also going to be the next meeting of what we call the Three Amigos, which is the meeting of President Bush, Prime Minister of Canada, and the President of Mexico. And so once again there will be actions that will take place at that time as well.
Is it true that talk about a common currency is going around?
It's been around for some time. There are a number of documents that have been written by various think tanks on both sides of the border, and in some of the reports and documents written by some of those think tanks, they've talked about several things, like a common market, like a customs union, and even a common currency.
The Amero, is that kind of?
So yeah, something of that nature. I can just imagine what that is. But anyway, so I mean that may very well happen. And of course, once you do that, that's almost the last straw of national sovereignty. When you actually pool everything into a common currency. Notice how long it took the European Union to reach that point. Once that happens, then that is the last straw, I think, in regards to national sovereignty. So once again, it's one of those issues that's sort of a hot and heavy issue that the elites don't want to raise right now. Nor do they want to raise the issue of water exports between Canada and the United States, simply because those are flashpoints that will stir up a great deal of resistance, popular resistance, and they don't want that to happen. And there's kind of a unwritten agreement among the elites to keep certain issues below the radar screen and to make sure they don't become hot public issues or hot button issues. And one of them is currency, is a common currency.